Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Fortinet Championship Data Dive Show. Last night I kept saying the Fortinet Open, just to be clear so no one gets confused. This is the Fortinet Championship. With that out of the way, quick reminder that a new show is coming out on Fridays now. It is the NFL Rundown Show. It was not very successful week one, as so I went 1-5 against the spread. So it'll mainly be sportsbook based. You can ask some, for fantasy questions. I'll try to help you as best as I can with Pro Football Focus, but I'm admittedly not a very good or even frequent fantasy football player. So it'll be more about, like I said, the sports book and the spreads. And I'm 1-0 since last night, so I've got some momentum heading into week two. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. But we're here for the Fortinet Championship and digging into some data for that. This is much more in my wheelhouse. As always. Statistics are provided by FantasyNational.com. It helped me win the season-long fantasy contest that I have with some friends and some coworkers and such. So it was a very successful year on that front, and I'm hoping I have some time to bring up the proof of that and such. But I'm trying to think of any other announcements or quick things that I need to bring up, but I don't think so. Nope, I can't think of anything. Like I said, Friday is the new show for the NFL. As always, chat is open. Let's interact. What do you want to see tonight? What kind of data you think is going to be relevant at the Fortinet Championship? We'll run through some odds on DraftKings Sportsbook now that they're out. I haven't been able to look at them quite thoroughly. I just saw that John Rahm's the favorite at 3.5 to 1, which is no surprise. But this intro's getting long. I'm rambling. So without any further delay, let's dig into the data for the 2022 Fortinet Championship. And we're going to transition here. And as I said last night, I was going to start the show with the tournament fact sheet when it comes out. And unfortunately, it doesn't have a lot of the information that I like to see. Nothing about average green size or water hazards, bunkers, and so on. It just has the yardage and the par setup. So as you can see here, it is a par 72 that this year is set up on the scorecard, at least, at 7,123 yards. Very, very short course. Very short course. And we saw some of that evidence last night in the initial research show. The greens are POA and bent. I have been mainly focusing on the POA. And when we really dig into the data, the more that I'm hoping to show that last year's Safeway Open was a bit of an outlier, and I'll show you some statistics why. But it looks like it's Bermuda. That's not a grass type. Bermuda and POA throughout the majority of the course, with some bluegrass and ryegrass in the rough. The superintendent or the director of agronomy, I don't know, says it's in the best shape it's ever been. So take that for what it's worth. This is a Robert Trent Jones redesign, originally designed by Ben Harmon. RTJ came in 1966, and then most recently Johnny Miller. But I just wanted to make sure that, as I promised last night, I started the show with the tournament fact sheet. So there's that. And then, even though I normally don't bring up the weather until the end of the Wednesday night show, and I certainly will do that again this week. Because this is the first event of the new season, when we bring in the 25 Korn Ferry Tour graduates, it's always important, at least to me, to see, because we have the very little data on the guys, whatever we can extract, I try to get. So if they play well on certain green types, Bermuda, POA, Bermuda, bentgrass, all that stuff, as well as conditions in the wind, whether it's calm, moderate, windy, any little information can certainly help get an idea on some of these players. And that's why I wanted to bring up the wind finder, just to see if there's a prevalent thing this week, rain or wind or anything. And to be honest with you, there's not. It's actually very calm. So that's going to be something to kind of look into, especially with the Korn Ferry Tour guys or the graduates. Maybe not necessarily the PGA Tour guys, but if someone doesn't play well in calm winds, that might be a little bit of a ding or a negative against them, just a little bit. It looks like Saturday evening might get a little, or Saturday afternoon into the evening might get a little breezy here, but it won't affect the cut. So that's the only reason I wanted to bring that up, because it's something that I will take into a small amount of consideration. Is that if somebody just absolutely crushes it in calm winds or is terrible in calm winds, it's going to play a slight factor. Granted, I did not build any of that into the mixed condition model, but I did want to show that, or bring this up and have that in our minds as we start digging into this data. And we're going to start here. I've already went ahead and filtered down to the last 24 rounds. And honestly, something that I have just found out today, this morning when I was getting into it, and I probably should have been honestly thought about this before, but I constantly say that you want to make sure that your data is relevant. As in, when you're dealing with POA specifically, it's mainly a western part of the country grass type on the greens, whereas in the south you get more Bermuda and bent and all that stuff. It's mainly a west coast green type, and because there's a few events but not many that have POA, if you start getting into the last 36, last 50 rounds of POA, you're getting into data back into 2017, 2016, and that it just doesn't really apply. So what I found today is that you can actually click on this 24 in Fantasy National, and that'll show you the last 24 rounds that are being considered for this player. So this, for example, is John Rahm. His last 24 rounds go back to May 13th at the Byron Nelson, whereas somebody like, let's say Ryan Armour, who is a PGA Tour player, well, that's also the Byron Nelson. That wasn't a very good example. Maybe Varner? Okay, Palmetto, so even less. You can see how it changes from player to player to see what the last 24 rounds is encapsulating. And the reason why I wanted to cap it at 24 for these Korn Ferry Tour guys, you can see exactly how far that 24 rounds goes. I mean, you can see here, Chad Ramey, he's got 2 rounds all the way back to 2015 that is in this 24 round set. So for him, you definitely want to, you've got some in 2018 as well. So to me, you definitely want to eliminate, sorry, I apologize, there you go. You definitely want to eliminate the 2015 2 rounds here. I would just throw them out. 2018 is a little bit different. It's certainly on the cusp of being relevant. And then you have 2021. But this is why it's important to realize what exactly you're looking at for these 24 rounds, the 12 rounds, the 36, and so on. And honestly, I just discovered that today, that this was a clickable thing. So, sincerely, my apologies. I am still learning some things as well through Fantasy National, even though I've used it with pretty good success in the past. Again, as always, chat's open. Let's have some interaction. Kind of want to bounce ideas off of you, see what you all are thinking. But so for the last 24 rounds, these are the strokes gained total leaders. Probably no surprise. You've got let me make sure that so none of the other filters are on. You've got John Rahm, Kevin Na. Mito Pereira made some appearances on the PGA Tour, but he was on the Korn Ferry majority of the time. He missed the cut at the Wyndham, but he played the 3M, he played the Barbasol, he was at the John Deere, Rocket Mortgage. But you see here, he had some very good finishes on the Korn Ferry Tour. He was 9th at the Simmons Bank, 2nd at Huntsville, 28th at the Veritex. So this is a guy that's used to having some high finishes on the Korn Ferry Tour. He's just graduated to the PGA Tour, and it's always important to get whatever data you can on these guys, since there's so little. And you can see that POA is his least favorite green type by far. He's not really good in calm weather, and then easy, average, and difficult. There, he's best when it's kind of average. And I kept saying last night that this was an easy course. One of the reasons why I think 2021 was an outlier is that if you go to the leaderboard here, this is 2020 when Cameron Champ won. It was -17 as the total score. That is on the easier side, but it's nothing outrageous like the the -20, -21 in that range. And when you so there's 2020, 2019 was -14, so it's getting even tougher. 2018, you had -15, so right in there, right in that same range. 2017, -18. So it is on the easier side, but the more I looked at it, the more I thought it was not a fair assessment to say this is an easy course, to classify it as easy. As you can see, Sink won at 21, Higgs was 19, Reevy, Shrielman, Stewart, and Red. All of these guys were at 18. You had a couple 17s. Some of those scores would have won those years. So, like I said, as I started really digging into the data, the more that I didn't feel like it was a good filter to use, being the easy filter here at Fantasy National in regards to this tournament. But you can see here there's a few Korn Ferry graduates that are in the top 10 in strokes gained total. You've got Mito, you got Andrew Novak, Nick Hardy, Austin Smotherman, Taylor Moore, and Chad Ramey, all in the top 10. Davis Riley is 11th. You have Callum Tarrant, Max McGreevy. Peter Uihlein is a Korn Ferry graduate, even though he earned his tour card, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago, and then lost it again. Has now regained it. But a lot of Korn Ferry Tour graduates here in the top 15 to 20 in strokes gained total, with no filters on. So it's very, very interesting to see. I think the first way to dig into this data is to just filter on these short courses. This is a very, very short course for a par 72. You have some par 70s that are longer than this. This being a par 72 is going to be, it's a very, very short course. And again, I've narrowed it down to the last 24, and just for just to check. We'll check Emiliano Grillo. So you can see here, just on short courses alone, no added filters. He's got results coming all the way back to 2020. How much is that going to play? I don't know. But it's always good to see what exactly your sample size is. You know, if you don't want to go back to 2020, maybe you need to narrow it down to the last 12. Or even, you know, here's 2, 4. If you go to the last 8, you know, you're getting stuff from April. If you go to the last 12, you're after including January, all the way back to January. So, again, it's always important to see what your sample size actually is looking, or what your data is looking at. But when we filter just on this short course filter here, the number one strokes gained total, no surprises, Webb Simpson. He's generally regarded as one of the he's not the longest hitter. He's very good around the green. He's very good with his irons on short course. He's just known as a short course player. When length doesn't matter, Webb Simpson's a guy that you should look out for. Kind of in the same line, Siwoo Kim is a good short course player. So you've got Webb Simpson, Siwoo Kim, Cameron Tringali, John Rahm, and Charlie Hoffman are your top 5, followed by Grillo, Homa, Na, and McNeely. I am going to keep it on this kind of pricing view, because they do have the DraftKings out, but I just like having this to keep it consistent so it doesn't create too much noise. And then obviously I'll change it for the DFS Tactics show. So that was the first thing I kind of want to get into. I always like looking at short course, kind of strokes gained total. Let's look at strokes gained approach just on these short courses. You know, who hits their irons well on short courses. You got Russell Knox, Taylor Gooch, Kyle Stanley, Mark Leishman, and Webb Simpson are your top 5. Varner, Kim, Steele, Matsuyama, and Tringali. So a lot of overlap there, as to be expected. And then when we narrow this down to, say, last 12, it gets a little bit more interesting, because again, you're limiting the amount of data. You're limiting the time as well. So now Taylor Gooch rises to number 1. Simpson's still there. Varner. Now you get some differences here. Adam Svensson, the Korn Ferry Tour graduate, is now 4th. Percy 5th. Leishman, Straka, Stanley, Steele, and Grillo round out the top 10. And just for example, Adam Svensson was nowhere to be found when we were last 24. And look at this. This is almost, worthy of being thrown out, because all of this is from 2019. That was the last time it was classified as short, less than 7,200. So, how much do you want to factor that in? That's not for me to say. I don't know how much I'm going to put into it. That's why it's always a very interesting challenge or puzzle the first few weeks to try and maneuver through the new players and what's going to play and what's not. Especially for these guys who there's just not a lot of data on. Just not a lot of data. Let's move off this short course. Again, Robert Trent Jones design, not one of the architects that we have here for Fantasy National. Let's just kind of look at calm. We just looked at the weather. Nothing says that the wind is going to be a major factor. So let's just look at strokes gained total over the past 24 rounds for guys in calm conditions. And Peter Malnati is now number 1. Rahm, Hoffman, Matsuyama, Siwoo Kim, Tringali, Homa, Na, Willie Willie Z, Will Zalatoris, and Bo Hoag are your top 10. So still a lot of overlap there in Siwoo, John Rahm, Tringali, Na. I mean, Webb Simpson is 13th, just lurking off of there. Taylor Gooch is a little bit further down. There's Gooch there. But certainly something to take into consideration this week. And just for example, let's look at the last 24 rounds in calm wind. This is going back to 2020, so not too far back, but still, I mean, you're going back more than a calendar year. Now, certainly, and I was doing this a little bit earlier, I was adjusting the time frame right here, all records. I was limiting it to the last 12 and sometimes even 6 months. And you can see how much that changes. I mean, you got some guys that have barely any rounds, and then some who, meet the 24. So I felt like that was a good added filter, just so we don't get a bunch of wacky data. And I'll probably go back and do that for the course length down here for you all. But while we're here on the calm conditions, in the past year, or 24 rounds, it's John Rahm, Hoffman, Malnati, Matsuyama, Kim, Tringali, Homa, Simpson, Na, and Will Zalatoris. So not a lot of change there. When you look at strokes gained approach, Tringali, Zalatoris, Homa, Hoffman, Rahm. So not a lot of difference there, just the order. Hoagie now rises, Varner rises, Neesmith and List are in the top 10. So some interesting stuff to see there. Let's take the calm off. Let's add the short. Now that we're filtering on the last calendar year, the last 12 months, see how that might change for strokes gained total. Tringali, Simpson, Hoffman, John Huh, and Siwoo Kim are the top 5. Homa, Griot, Na, McNeely, Charles Howell. It's interesting. John Rahm actually falls off. So he's only played 4 rounds that's been on a short course. It's very interesting. He was at the Northern Trust this year. In fact, let's see how he did, because I don't remember. John Rahm. I guess it'd be easier just to search. 3rd. I guess I probably should have seen that at the top. Yep. So he played pretty darn good. Quite clearly played pretty darn good. But again, that's also why you want to look at, what exactly the data is looking at. So for somebody like Doug Gim, who's got 24 rounds, this is going back to the beginning of the calendar year of Sony, back to the Sony, and then so on and so forth. So somebody like Doug Gim traditionally plays more short courses than John Rahm. Obvious, because John Rahm's in a bunch of the big tournaments. But I kind of want to dig into this leaderboard here and show you why I think 2021's Safeway is a bit of an outlier. And just for those who aren't confused, or who are confused or whatever, the Fortinet is the new sponsor of this tournament. Just for this year, they became the title sponsor this year. This is still the same course, same layout, same everything. The Silverado Resort and Spa, the North Course, has hosted the Safeway, now Fortinet, for years. So you're not experiencing different courses or anything. It's just the title sponsor change. But let's look at the data from 2021 when Stewart Cink won. So you had minus 21. It was classified as bent. The scoring was easy. It was a little bit longer than setup, and hitting the fairways was easy to average. And you had some really, really low scores. Cink 21. I mean, even minus 10 was 44th, tied for 44th. So Very, very, very easy setup last year. The reason why I think it's a bit of an outlier when we kind of go through this, off the tee was a factor. Strokes gained approach. Putting has always been very important here, so that really didn't change. This is where it starts to get a little inconsistent. Here, the greens kind of mattered a lot. Good drives gained. Fairways was very important, and we saw that the distance when we covered this last night wasn't very important. But if we and as we go through this, like the par threes really kind of didn't matter, at least in a total sense. The par fours really mattered, and particularly these. The most, there's 6 par fours from 400 450, so the majority of the par fours at Silverado really gave an indicator. And then of course the par fives, weren't a good, weren't indicative. Sure, you had some high finishes, but there were some high finishes with guys losing quite a bit of strokes on the par fives. But if we go into 2020, this is where things kind of start to show some patterns away from 2021. So here, course is short. Hitting the fairways was difficult every single round. It was classified as POA. The strokes gained off the tee started to matter a little less. Around the green was very important. Putting is always very important. One of the big things I wanted to have you all note, greens and regulation is still fairly important, but these good drives gained. That is a lot of high finishes except for Morikawa. And even Zach Blair was, just below field average. And then the par fours, very important. And their high finishes on 400, 450. So you had a lot here. Blair and Zhang didn't play them all that well. The par fives, look here. The par fives, click off of that. 550 to 600. 3 of the 4 par fives fall in this range. The top, 9 were all positive in both strokes gained par 5 and at the distance. We go to 2019. You're going to get more of the same. Hitting the fairways was difficult. Course length was short. You had a couple of rounds which were easy, but then it got tougher over the weekend. Around the green mattered. Putting mattered. Off the tee did a little bit too, but around the green really starts to kick in here. Good drives gained. The exception of Brandt Snedeker, the top 13 were all very, very high in good drives gained. Again, except for Snedeker and then J.B. Holmes, which was just under field average. The par fours, extremely important. The top, what is this? Top 24, 25? These are huge positives of strokes gained par 4. And the top, 10, 12 for the majority of the par 4s. And even then, only one was below at -0.5. And then all the way down again to Patrick Rogers at 25th is positive. So this is where you're starting to hopefully see some patterns here. What plays out well at Silverado. Again, looking at the par 5. This one was a bit of an outlier as far as the strokes gained total par 5s. But again, the range, the 3 of the 4 par 5s here, all of those are positive. You got Holmes there, and then 3 more that were positive. And just for one more year, just to show consistency, 2018, again, POA. This year it was a little slightly longer. Hitting the fairways was difficult. The scoring relative to par was average to even difficult. You look at, I skipped the strokes gained. Around the green mattered a little bit less. Again, strokes gained putting, always very important. Come to the fairways, good drives gained, huge amounts. Except for Phil Mickelson, huge amounts of good drives gained. You had Andrew Landry, which was barely, negative. 2 more in the positive. Harkins is a bit of an outlier. He did not have good drives. He performed well in other areas. But again, high finishes and good drives gained. Par 4s, all green, all the way down to 43rd. Were all positive in the strokes gained par 4s. And then in the majority of the par 4s, the 400 to 450, you had Finau, who played them, pretty, not terrible, but not great. Van Oswegen, same way, but, what is this? 11 of the top 13 were positive, and pretty good amount of positive. Par 5, pretty good indicator here in 2018, and high finishes were all extremely highly positive in the par 5s. So hopefully that's showing you all some quite consistent numbers as to why I think the 2021 Safeway was a bit of an outlier. I'm not saying to throw out that data entirely, but not by any means, because it's still the same course. But I imagine the course was set up a little easier, or there were some extra circumstances as to why it played easy. So, with that in mind, I built a first pass at a mixed condition model, and I'm going to bring this back to the 2020 leaderboard just in case we want to refer back to it. But I built a first pass at a mixed condition model, and the reasoning behind what I was doing, showing you that in-depth analysis, is the reasoning behind why I chose some of the statistics that I did. So I wanted to look at the last 24 rounds on short courses, and I just wanted to see strokes gained total, who played well on short courses. To the same extent, if you followed me for any length of time, you know that I value iron play, approach play more than putting. So I've got that at 15. We saw around the green really kick into focus starting in 2020 and working its way back. So I put that in at 5%. It's certainly arguable I should put more in that, but I got it at 5% now. There's no arguing that strokes gained putting is so very important here. I've set that at 15%. Sorry, I keep checking over to make sure you can see what I'm seeing. Birdies are better gained. I have been toying with taking this out now that I know this isn't a birdie fest or a very easy course, so I'm thinking about taking that out. I kept it at 5% for now, just to see who gives themselves chances at birdie runs and such. But we saw how important this good drives gained was in indicating very high finishes. And I put that at 10% for the last 24 rounds, and a good drive gained when hitting the fairways are difficult. We saw there the majority of the time these fairways are difficult to hit. And for those who are wondering, I'm going to bring up the glossary here. And what exactly constitutes a good drive? Well, a good drive... Good drives are where the player either hits the fairway off the tee, or the player misses the fairway but still hits the green or fringe in regulation. That is what's considered a good drive. I understand that most of these, it could be argued that, if someone's hitting good drives, or if they're racking up this category, they should be playing well. True. But this, combined with the importance of putting, especially here, is what's going to give us the optimal lineup, I think. or optimal chance at finding the winner. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page of what is defined, at least by Fantasy National terms, as a good drive. But again, so I'm coming back to this. Let's see. Yeah, you can. So I've got good drives gained. Set that at 10%, and then these four, I am toying around with percentages and filters. Right now, I've just got it at a base level. Each one of these are at 10%. Strokes gained par 4 overall. Strokes gained par 4 of the range, and this actually needs to be changed to 400 to 450. So that was an oversight on my part. Strokes gained par 5, and then strokes gained par 5s at this distance. In fact, I'm actually going to remove that. Let's go back. Let's go to strokes gained par 4. Let's make sure we add the correct distance here. Last 24. Let's add that. We'll go back to our mixed condition model. Keep everything else the same. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Yeah, so this is at 10. This is at 10. This is at 10. 15, 15s. I've eliminated something. Why did I not add? I probably have to redo this mixed condition model. But anyway, let's look at this real quick. It shouldn't change too much. Yeah. So John Rahm, quite clearly still the number 1 ranked player. He's the biggest fish in this sea at this tournament. And just from memory, this didn't change a whole lot. John Rahm, Pat Perez, Cameron Tringale, Webb Simpson, and Hank Lebiota, top 5. Will Zalatoris, Nick Hardy, a PGA or a Korn Ferry Tour graduate, 7th. Taylor Gooch, Davy Vanderwalt, I believe is how you pronounce that, and Doug Gim. So that's why it's important to get some of this data on these Korn Ferry Tour guys. For example, Davy here has really, really good statistics. Par 4s, he plays well. Good drives. Par 5s, he plays well. So it's interesting. Interesting to see. I will certainly have this, refined for Wednesday night. But again, this was a first pass just to kind of get an idea of what the data is kind of looking at, who it's favoring and such. I'm actually going to now remove all of these just because now that I've shown that, and I feel a bit sheepish that I had the wrong value in there anyway. Here's the breakdown. So you notice here that normally I don't have the Korn Ferry filter checked for obvious reasons. I'm actually going to uncheck the PGA Tour because I want to see just the Korn Ferry Tour guys or people who played on the Korn Ferry Tour. So I've still got the last 24 rounds in the last 12 months. I'm actually probably going to lower that to the last 6. So in the last 6 months, or the last 24 rounds, I want to get off the par 4 and just go by strokes gained. Of the guys who played on the Korn Ferry Tour, who played the best in the last 6 months on the Korn Ferry Tour? Well, Peter Uihlein, Andrew Novak, Taylor Moore, Nick Hardy, and Davis Riley. So it's good to see that the initial run of the mixed condition model threw out some of these names. Nick Hardy, Taylor Moore, Austin Smotherman was close to the top 10. So there is the draft. I was looking at DraftKings here. There is the strokes gained total. Leaders or whatnot for the Korn Ferry in the last 6 months. Well, I also want to see, and you'll notice, there is no course apparently on the Korn Ferry that plays less than 7,200 yards. It's very, very interesting. If we expand this out to the last 36, does that change? No, it does not. So no Korn Ferry event played this short. This is very interesting to see. Did any of them have POA? It does not look like it. So no POA, no short courses. Very interesting to see. However, I believe they had some difficult hitting fairways. They did. So in the last 6 months, when fairways were difficult to hit, Nick Hardy, Peter Ewan, David Lipsky, Chad Ramey, and Andrew Novak were the top 5. And then Lovemark, Riley, Moore, Vanderwalt, and Brett Druitt are the rest of the top 10. And you'll notice that there is no wind filter. Some of these stats they just don't have for Korn Ferry events. So, but it's always interesting to see, especially at the beginning of a year, when some of these guys you never heard of. It's interesting to look at some of their data. However little it is, some is better than none. As long as you're getting somewhat decent data, and Nick Hardy here, for example, he's got stuff from May all the way back to mid-March. So it's not nothing. It's not nothing. Let me bring up DraftKings Sportsbook. I had just saw the odds before I came on live. So I mentioned earlier, John Rahm, huge favorite here this week. Huge favorite. I'm going to get off the Korn Ferry or just add the PGA Tour. John Rahm's at 3.5 to 1. Nobody else is even close to him. Let me remove the difficult to hit fair. Actually, you know what? I'll just keep that on, just so y'all can kind of take a gander at that as I'm telling you the odds. So John Rahm 3.5 to 1. Webb Simpson and Kevin Na 14 and 16 to 1 respectively. My first initial lean was Kevin Na for this tournament. He's good on short courses. These are generally wedge type courses. He's good with wedges. He's been playing extremely well lately. He's been hot with the putter. He's not a failure on POA. He's okay when it's calm. That was my first initial lean. 16 to 1, I don't like the price. I don't like the price. Matsuyama and Will Zalatoris are at 22 to 1. And then Tringali at 30. Hoffman at 35. Varner at 40. Munoz, Leishman, and Cameron Champ are at 45. And then to round out, the somewhat second tier of favorites, Mito Pereira, Siwoo Kim, and Emiliano Grillo at 50 to 1. A couple of notes here. Cameron Champ, the 2020 winner. Your defending champion, Stuart Sink. He's not here this week. But your 2020 champ, 2020 champion, Cameron Champ, sits at 45 to 1. It's very interesting. Coming off a win. Let's just search for Champ here. Cameron Champ. He's coming off a win at the 3M. In a tournament that I'm going to classify as an outlier. when he gains strokes on the green, which is not very often, it's generally upwards of 3. Here was 1. Here was 8.5. If you look at all these, the rest of these tournaments, they are red. He is not a good putter. Now, certainly he could have found something recently that leads to him being a better putter. Absolutely possible. But you can't count on 8.5 happening very often. When it does, he's good enough to win. But, 8.5 is certainly an outlier. Combine that with the around the green. I don't like Cameron Champ this week. To be honest with you, of the people in the top 50, saying top 50 as in 50 to 1 or lower, I kind of like Mark Leishman. Kind of. Let me take off the hitting fairways being difficult. In the last 24 rounds, strokes gained total. Make sure there's no other filters. Yeah, Mark Leishman is not the best. He's not the best, but there are some underlying things that I want you to look at. He's very good when it's calm. He generally plays better when it's easy to average. This is easy to average. Granted, he's not great on POA, but he's traditionally been a very good putter. And on a course like this, where putting matters, certainly, he didn't putt well at the BMW of the Northern Trust. But when you look at Southern style courses or West Coast courses, like the Genesis, like the Farmers, like the Sony, and even the Tour Tournament of Champions. Well, that week he wasn't, but you look at these run of West Coast courses that generally have POA, he's been pretty good at them. Mark Leishman at 45 to 1, I think you could do worse. I'm not necessarily rushing to the window, to use a horse racing term. I'm not necessarily rushing to get my bet in on Mark Leishman, but it's intriguing at 45 to 1. I liked Mito Pereira, but I don't like the 50 to 1 on him. I was hoping he'd be a little higher, but I mean, there's a reason why in the past 6 months, 24 rounds, he's tied for third. We looked at him a little earlier. He's not great on POA, but there's a lot of things to like here. He's been playing very well against PGA Tour competition. Cameron Champ won the 3 Open. Same tournament, he came in 6th. Missed the cut at the Wyndham, but the 2 things he was strong at are things that play well here. He's not opposed to high finishes, 2nd, 9th, again, 5th and 6th on the PGA Tour. So Mito Pereira's got some game, and some people won't know about him. I like Mito. I don't like the 50 to 1. Otherwise, I don't see a whole lot of value here. I kind of liked Tringali, 30 to 1. He's very good on POA. He's a good, generally a good putter. 30 to 1 is fair. It's not overwhelming a value, I don't think. It's fair. I wouldn't say it's a bad bet. I wouldn't, discredit it. Again, kind of like Mark Leishman, I'm not rushing to get it in, but it's not terrible. I think there's a lot of value lower in the betting board. You saw on the mixed condition model, which I'll update, that Pat Perez was up there. He's sitting at 12th in strokes gained total. He's at 60 to 1 right now, and there's a lot to like Pat Perez. He generally plays well on the West Coast. POA, decent at. Calm to moderate is okay at easy and average difficulty. But he's just a good putter in general, and putting plays so much at this tournament. I wonder how his record is at the Safeway. He's never played it. Interesting. But let's kind of take a look here. He missed the cut at the Genesis. That isn't fantastic. But AT&T Pebble Pro-Am, Pebble Beach has POA for sure. 1.8 gained. Waste Management missed the cut. Didn't putt extremely well. Farmers 3.7. Amex. So hit and miss. Sony gained 5. That's what you want out of a player. Volatile putting. So when he has his hot weeks and he combines it with anything else, he's going to have a high finish. If he's just neutral on the around the green and off the tee, like he wasn't at this tournament, and still pops with the putter, you're going to have yourself a nice little payday, I think. So I like Pat Perez at 60-1. You coming down lower on the price board. Snedeker at 70. He's played well here. Reeve was somebody we saw a lot of last night on the tournament history. So Chez Reeve over the past 5 years is number 2 on strokes gained total at this course of the players in the field. That's saying something. And he's sitting at 70-1. I mean, you can do a lot worse. If you check on Chez here, by far his worst putting surface is Bermuda. Well, this is either POA or bent. I'm going to say POA. Generally plays better when it's more difficult. This is certainly on the average side, average to easy. Plays well enough in calm winds. He has not historically been the best putter, but when it does pop, you have a top 20. He did miss the cut at the PGA, putt well, missed the cut at the Wells Fargo, but I want you to see he missed the cut at the Wells Fargo and couldn't do a fuck thing else. I mean, lost 5.5 around the green, lost 3 on approach. So that's why he missed the cut. It wasn't because of the putting. And yes, he's generally not a great putter. Approach is fine. Off the tee is fine because he's known as a fairway finder. You could do worse than Chez Reeve at 70-1. I kind of like Chez a little bit sneaky. I think he's a little bit sneaky. But the biggest value, I think, here, and again, I haven't gone through the entire price board, player by player. There's 2. I said the biggest, but there's 2. Brennan Steele won in 2017 and in 2018. So he's got good vibes at this course. Now, yes, he's, fallen off a little bit, but he likes this course. And if you check on Brendan Steele here, never been a good putter. Plays well when it's easy. Plays well when it's calm. And he's actually been finding a little bit of form with the putter. A little bit of form. But, again, you can't argue with the results here at this course. The Genesis lost a little bit putting. AT&T Pebble Beach gained strokes when it was POA. Sony, short course, wedge type course, played extremely well. Fortinet here, they've changed it to the Fortinet, but it's the safe way. Maybe that's why Pat Perez didn't come up, because they've actually retroactively changed it. Yep. So they've retroactively changed it to the Fortinet. So again, he's got stellar success here. He is sitting at 100-1. 100-1 as a previous champion, a previous 2-time champion. That to me is just ridiculous value. That's not to say he's going to go win. That's not what I'm saying. But at 100-1, absolutely worth an investment. The other one that I like, Hank Lebiota. You see here, strokes gained total over the last 6 months. He is 7th. Putting, 2nd. Around the green, 28th. when you look at Hank Lebiota, and he's not bad on POA. He's not bad when it's calm. Look at this putting. He has been in fuego with the putter the last 10 tournaments. Now certainly the Northern Trust he just didn't play well at all that week. But I mean, there was a run there where he was, rattling off top 10s and top 15s, all that stuff. And he hasn't played well at the Fortinet, but it hasn't been because of his putting. And you notice some of these numbers are starting to get better. Last year, 2020, he lost 2 strokes off the tee. Lately, he's just been losing about a half. Approach, he was, basically field average. He's been gaining lately. He's actually been better with the putter than he was here. There's a lot to like about Hank Lebiota. He sits at 110 to 1. I mean, when you get Steele and Lebiota at 110 and 100 to 1, it's hard for me to pass on. Those 2 bets you will definitely see on my social media. You will definitely see that Wednesday night or Thursday morning when you hopefully follow me on social media. Because those are 2 bets I'm absolutely going to make. Again, I don't know how much exposure I'm going to put myself since this is the first tournament. Maybe want to kind of see how things are playing out, see some of these new guys, or at least Korn Ferry graduates. They might not be new, but Korn Ferry graduates, see how they play and such. But those are 2 bets I'm absolutely going to make. And I'll probably double down and make those top 20s as well, depending on the odds. So let's see. Again, chat's open. What are you all thinking about? What do you all want to see? I'm trying to think of anything else that you all might want to kind of run through, because this is what I was looking at today, kind of going through all of this information, trying to gather this for tonight's show, and for my own, starting to think about DFS and betting, because the betting lines weren't out today when I was checking earlier. Let's see. We've done the tournament history. Recent results is, Northern Trust, BMW. We've done the course breakdown, but we never hurts to go back again. You can see how important putting is at this place. Let's check top 5s. Yeah, I mean, it's growing even more, approach and putting. When you look at winners, it starts to normalize a little bit. It's mostly approach, a little bit more off the tee, but I mean, it's top 10s, putting and approach. We saw how important the par 4s were, and particularly the par 5s of 550 to 600. So that, kind of plays out here. The par 4s, 400 to 450 right there. So that's been playing out in strokes gained, who plays those well. The one thing that I was, kind of shocked about, as I really dug into the data, and we did a little bit of this last night on the research show. You would think that because the majority of approach shots come from 100 to 120, basically these wedge ranges, that those proximities would matter. They ended up not. It was kind of hit and miss, to be honest. Like some guys, won and they were negative in these ranges. Some guys, that were 8th or 5th or whatever were very high, and that's the main reason why they were that high. So it was kind of hit and miss. I didn't feel comfortable using that as one of the indicators of success. I mentioned this last night. I mentioned how this course was easy. Again, you can see this is kind of an outlier here, and I didn't really pay much attention to that last night. It fully admitting that. because it's really hovered, from even par to -2, which is on the easier side, but it's certainly not. Oh, excuse me. It's certainly not easy. So, driving accuracy. This really shows, 2020, 2019, so on, that it's just generally been difficult to hit fairways here. Higher green percentage, scrambling better. One thing that I'm definitely probably going to add to the mixed condition model for Wednesday is this 3-putt avoidance. I don't want to put a whole lot into it, but I'm definitely going to add 3-putt avoidance to it because it's pretty prevalent here. And again, I don't know if it's because the greens are fast or they're slopey. That I don't know. That's why I wish we would have gotten a little bit more information from that tournament fact sheet. But because what we have is this here, this chart here, I'm going to factor in 3 putts a little bit. Driving distance a little higher here. Proximity is roughly the same, 28.5 here versus 28 3/4. The average tour event, so not a lot there. So, that's what I have as far as the data dive. I feel like we've gone pretty in depth. Again, I'll hold this open for a couple minutes, see if anyone's gonna hop into chat here, ask and see what they want to see. Mention something that maybe they're seeing that I'm not, or maybe want to ask about specific odds on a player if I didn't cover them. There are certainly some names here that are, people will recognize the names that are 150 plus. You got Kyle Stanley 150, Ryan Armour 150, Matt Kuchar's 150. So there are guys down here that are, bigger names. I mean, Phil Mickelson's at this tournament. Phil Mickelson's 6th. What did I just see? He is 80-1. So I mean, if there's somebody you want to see real quick, let me know, or let me know in the comments. I'll always get back to those after the show. But for now, with the data, I still like Kevin Na a little bit. I don't like the 16-1, but I still think this course plays well for him. Again, I don't like the 50-1 on Mito Pereira. I was hoping for a little bit more, but I like him as a player. If we filter on the short, that's really going to show where my line of thinking is. Webb always going to be good on short courses. If you want to bet John Rahm, I'm never going to argue against betting John Rahm. You're just going to have to lay some serious money to make anything on John Rahm at 3.5-1. Tringali's okay. The analytics like him. Like I said, Mark Leishman's intriguing. Don't know if I'd bet it, but it's intriguing at least. If you follow me for any time, I've got FOMO on Siwoo Kim, so that's probably a bet I'm going to make, especially considering he plays short courses generally fairly well. He's never been a good putter, which is troubling for this course, but plays well when it's easy. Actually prefers wind, so that's another strike on him. So he hadn't been playing very well lately, that's for sure, except for the Wyndham when he was in that 6-man playoff. Because that was Russell Henley, and I had a bet on Russell Henley, and he choked that 4-footer on 72. I'm not jaded or anything about that, as you can tell. Water under the bridge, clearly. There's some names that I'm kind of considering. I'm really excited to get into the DFS slate Wednesday and for this weekend. Now with football being the primary sport that a lot of people are playing, I think this is an opportune time for people who are analytically driven, really like golf, really want to get into golf, to make some headway, make some money heading into the golf season. If for nothing else, you get some information on the Korn Ferry Tour graduates. You get to see how they play in certain conditions and so on. So this is, even if you're not betting, or even if you're not playing DFS and you just like golf, this is a prime opportunity to become much more knowledgeable than your peers and than your competitors when the quote golf season comes around in January and February. So, I'm excited. I can't wait to start a new season. Hopefully, we'll repeat our success as fantasy league champions. In fact, if you give me one moment, ramble on if you want to, continue to make some notes on this. Remember, this is on short courses here. This strokes gained total. If you want to take some notes on that, I'm actually going to bring up the email from the guy that runs the fantasy league. Let me minimize this so that way people are anonymous. That way I don't reveal people who don't want to be public. Let me see here. I apologize, I'm taking a little bit of time. Again, this is just more so proof that I'm not spewing BS at you. Let's see. Let me bring up my software, make sure I'm showing what I can or can't not. There you go. So he does a little bit of a wrap here, or the previous tournament. Congratulations to the dumbass for his season-long victory. And then the one that I'm actually more proud of is this one here. That again, sorry guys, I just want to prove that I actually kind of know what I'm doing, and I keep talking about how I was particularly proud or thankful for Fantasy National. If I wasn't a Fantasy National member, none of this would have been possible. Let's see. What do we got here? We're going to slide over. Need to trim that down a little bit so that way people are still anonymous. Let me make sure I get what I need here. There we go. So, dumbass's earnings of $58 million shattered the previous record, and this was with a $28 million cap instead of the normal 30. So with my analysis here, thanks to Fantasy National, I'm taking very little credit. Thanks to Fantasy National, I was able to set the record for most money made by the chosen golfers. So again, apologize for the for the delay there and the self pat on the back and all that stuff. But again, just hopefully showing you all that I have a modicum of some expertise here. If you all are just now joining and watching me, for those who have been with me for a little bit, I appreciate the support. Hopefully you all have shared in some of my winnings. Hopefully you haven't followed me too much on the losing. But anyway, that's going to do it for the Data Dive show. Tune in Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics. It'll be a fun show. It'll be interesting to see how guys or how contestants are trying to make their lineups for the first tournament of the season. I imagine there will be a lot of John Rahm, just because John Rahm's here. But we'll see what we get. We'll see what we can get price wise and such, and let me know what kind of bets you're making, what kind of bets you're thinking about for this week. I threw out some names there in the comments or in social media. Throw out some names at me. I'd be interested to see where you all are at and what you're thinking about. So with that, that's going to wrap up the Data Dive. Then, for any bets that you make at the Fortinet, and until Wednesday night, may all your bets be profitable.